Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here for Week 5 review, Week 6 picks, a 2-for-1 today due to Dynamite David travel. So we have to go 2-for-1, combining the recap and review and our picks on a Wednesday this week. So
big show.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Let's start out with Week 5. Another interesting week. A handful of upsets in there. A handful of teams I think got exposed a little bit in Week 5, and we just sort of we know a little bit more as these weeks come by and by. Let's start out with the big game on Friday night. Iowa went to Maryland. Maryland was all hyped up, and then this game was pretty much over quite quickly. The only thing I could say is how confident Iowa was coming to this. They were passing the ball like crazy in the first half, and I don't think I've ever seen Iowa be that aggressive in the first half. So that pretty much told you what Iowa thought of this Maryland team. They didn't think they could score on them. They didn't think they could match up with them. So definitely think, Iowa looks better and better. The offense seems to be coming around. Maryland sort of got exposed for what they were, sort of a fraud. They go 4-1 now into Ohio State. What'd you make of this game?
Yeah, definitely not the outcome that I thought it was going to be. I think I ended up placing a small bet on Iowa, but I didn't think they were going to win by almost 40. But just Maryland's defense.
I don't think they had combined for 50 points all year long.
Like you said, game plan wise, I bet Maryland was caught off guard a little bit.
Yeah, I was caught off guard.
This was not a typical Iowa football, which, if you're a Hawkeyes fan, that kind of gives you hope for the rest of this year, because hey, maybe this is going to be a little different. Maybe we can maybe this next coming week we can take down the big dogs, because that's what's coming up.
Yes, it is, definitely. So Iowa continues to be in and around their top teams in college football so far this year, and then you got Maryland, who got a little bit exposed. We'll see how their season goes forward after a tough loss at home on Friday night. Next up, another team that sort of got exposed a little bit, Alabama, Ole Miss. Everyone was hyping this game up. The over-unders ended a ridiculous 80, and one team came to play. The other team did not come to play, and Alabama pretty much dominated this thing from the outset in this one.
Well, we both cashed in a good under.
Yes, we definitely did.
And I just, Alabama's defense really impressed me, and their offense was great as well. But I think a lot of their scoring came off of, that big fourth down stop on that first drive. I think really set the tone of the whole game. Just that guy coming out of nowhere just stopped the guy dead in his tracks. And Bama really could have kept this thing rolling. I thought they put on the brakes pretty early. So that over under might have got a little bit closer, because Alabama could do pretty much what they wanted to do in this game. So I don't know if I was more surprised by. I actually was probably more surprised by Alabama's dominance than by Ole Miss. I think we got what we were expecting from Ole Miss.
Yes.
Crazy coaching decisions by Kiffin, going for it all the time. But their offense can still move the ball, and I don't think they need to get too bummed, and they need to. They got another big game coming up this weekend, and I think Ole Miss can bounce back.
Yeah, the thing with this is one of the reasons why I always just dislike Kiffin. He came into this game and he sort of built in his own excuse by going for it on fourth downs. He's, he doesn't just want to play the game. There's always something in there. So, we went for it on all these fourth downs. If we had gotten them, we'd be in the game. And then you go, well, we didn't get them, so Bama scored on us. It's always just a built-in reason to lose these big-time games, which he never seems to win. He has not won pretty much ever in his whole career, and yet he still keeps getting coaching jobs. I do respect his ability to set up an offensive game plan, but in this game, you saw it. If that offensive game plan comes in, doesn't work, I've never seen his ability to adjust in game to anything. And that's when you get all those, fourth downs, or when he was at USC, he used to go for 2 points every time down there.
Kicking a 73-yard field goal.
Kicking a 73-yard field goal in the Oakland game. At least their kicker was good in that one. It's just that sort of stuff that drives me a little bit nuts about him. And I do respect his ability to set up an offensive game plan, but I've never really liked how he is in-game coaching. If you shut that initial game plan down, he doesn't seem to have a plan B. He didn't have a plan B in this one. And Alabama just sort of once again proves that they are probably the best team in the country right now. I think you also saw it where I think that Florida game, you sort of see where I think they turned off in that first half at 21-3, and they thought this thing's washed. And then Florida did a little something different, got to them. But this Alabama team looks really, really good right now. Not probably quite as NFL dominant players on the offensive side, but it's still an offense that can hurt you for sure.
Yeah, I still think that the biggest difference in this Bama team from other teams is their defense.
Yeah.
Defense is just stacked. So.
All right, we'll move on to the other team that's probably right there in the best. We talked about it in our preview. Arkansas had to get out on top or it was going to be ugly.
Yep.
They did not get out on top.
No.
They got behind early and quickly, and then this pretty much thing was a wrap from there. Arkansas sort of is what we thought they were. If they can get on top and impose their style of football, they become a difficult team to play. But if they get behind like in this, they don't have much. They can't go deep, off that play action because nobody cares if you're running the ball.
Yep.
And this Georgia defense, once again, looks really, really good in this game. Offense, solid, but I'm still not totally sold on this offense right now.
Yeah, this talk about the game couldn't have gone any worse for Arkansas. This is just everything, the early block punt,
that one was the killer. That block punt puts him down.
It's not a team that's going to dig out of a hole. So they now Georgia's offense, like you said, but that defense, I think they're giving up single-digit points per game.
Yes.
Low single-digit points per game, I believe. So we'll see how they do moving forward. They still got Florida left.
Yes.
And LSU left too, I believe.
Well, I don't know if we're getting much offense from either of those two.
But I think those are the two biggest games they've got left on their schedule. So Georgia looks like they could run the table and get to that big matchup against Alabama in the SEC championship game.
So the only thing you sort of wonder is when Georgia is going to do something Georgia-like. And
when are they going to pull? When's Kirby going to blow a game? Mark Richt impression and blow a big game?
Yes. My question is, defensively they look really, really good, but you start to sort of look at it a little bit. And I don't think they've played what we would consider a top 30 offense, all season long. And really, every offense we've seen them play is probably 50 or below. Arkansas might have been the best offense that they have played this season. You got UAB, you got Vanderbilt, you got Clemson. It's just, how good is this defense? Or is it sort of they've played a lot of really bad offenses? Now you look at their schedule, there aren't really a lot of good offenses left to play.
Florida.
Depending on how you want to consider Tennessee's offense after what we saw over the weekend, I don't know if we'll be able to run straight down the middle of the field without anybody touching someone. But what do you make of this Georgia defense here? And will they Georgia in this season?
I think if they will, it's going to be that Florida game. I honestly still think Florida's one of the better teams in the SEC. I think they had a few bad breaks against Kentucky, but I still like this Florida team, and I think offensively they're more talented than Georgia. Georgia still can't make up their mind who. I think they want Stetson Bennett to play quarterback, but JT Daniels is the big name. I don't know if they've made up their mind yet on that. He conveniently had some mysterious injury.
Every time I come on the radio and hear something, there's a new bodily part of his anatomy that is hurt. It's his shoulder. There was some weird nerve in his back. It's always something. So I think probably Stetson Bennett's probably the guy.
Yeah.
Going forward. And
still not very impressive.
No,
offensively. So if they get up against a team that can do anything against their defense, I think Georgia could be in trouble.
Where I'm curious if they match up with one of those teams that can manage to get 20 points on them. I don't think anybody we've seen so far is
Yeah.
probably capable of getting 20 points on them, unless you sort of concede to Arkansas giving 20 points, but they aren't even that type of offense. So we'll see going forward if Georgia can keep this up. Another big game, semi-big game this week. We'll get into that later. We probably won't go over that game because it was an atrocious game to watch in Auburn and LSU.
Oh, yeah.
But we might be back on the LSU horse this week too. So we're a glutton for punishment here. Next up, the Pac-12 officials got a big win over the Oregon Ducks this week. Stanford won in overtime, 31-24. Oregon didn't blow them out. I don't think either of us thought this was going to be a blowout game. It was a very difficult game to go into Stanford, win that one. But they did have the lead. And then, 5 straight calls went against them on Stanford's last drive, including a very dubious pass interference, which I'm not even sure there was contact on, and gave them an untied down. So Stanford could tie this game up. We won't mention the targeting call that got the best defensive end in the country and probably the number 1 pick in the draft thrown out. And now he's not going to play in the upcoming week. And then another roughing the passer penalty on there that also was quite dubious. I think they might have grazed chest on that one. So what'd you make of this game?
Yeah, I had quit watching it.
Oh, yeah, because you came in and was like,
I thought, I watched it
Oregon
early. I thought I saw them come back. They took charge on the game, and I was like, oh, okay, so Oregon's got this. So I went and watched some other stuff. Ended up going to sleep. Didn't look back at the score. Very surprised. So I had to go back and watch a replay of this one, and I just saw the way it went down. And you'd think Pac-12 officials would want Oregon to stay undefeated, so a Pac-12 team still keeps their playoff hopes alive. But yeah, that was some really ugly officiating at the end, and it's a shame because I thought this was a pretty solid Oregon team who got a big win against Ohio State.
Yeah, I don't quite throw Oregon out yet. 1 loss on the road in conference. They don't have any leeway now, but they do probably have the biggest win so far on the season at Ohio State. So you give them a little credit there. I think you sort of look at this game with the sort of glasses that it was, and Oregon was probably the winner of this game, and the Pac-12 officials made sure this game went into overtime here. So, I don't put them in yet, but I don't think we throw Oregon quite out the door just yet. All right, next up, Oklahoma, Kansas State. Kansas State couldn't quite get it done this time, but this game played out rather similar to the other 2 games, a little bit more scoring. Spencer Rattler, I will say, probably played his best game I'd seen this season. Now, that being said, there were a couple dropped interceptions that probably could have turned this. He did throw another interception, but other than that, he was rather efficient. The only thing I could say is Kansas State couldn't quite get that running game going. Vaughn, who had torn up Oklahoma the previous 2 years, couldn't quite find enough room. So I will say the Oklahoma defense, at least the last 3 or 4 weeks, has been up to at least some sort of standard here. So you got that going into the big Texas game. What'd you make of this one?
Yeah, another nail biter for Oklahoma. They keep finding ways to win.
5-0 with a total margin of 10 points.
But they've yet to really impress me.
Yeah.
But they keep passing every test that the Big 12 can throw at them. Biggest test coming up this next week. But I still think, Rattler was efficient. But like you said, there was dropped turnovers. He did have 1 interception.
Yeah.
But I think they're just really leaning on this run game and really leaning on their defense. They just do just enough to keep them in the lead. This was back and forth the whole way. It seemed like every time Kansas State scored, Oklahoma answered.
Yeah.
And Kansas State just couldn't quite get over the top. So another good game, but you got to get Oklahoma credit.
Yep.
They're winning their games. They went on a hostile road environment and got another win. So if they can get past this next week, they don't have a whole lot left to get past.
Yeah. We probably won't. We aren't going to talk about the Texas TCU game, but Texas did get past TCU. Got over a little bit of a bugaboo there.
Good run game.
Yeah. Who is your best team in the Big 12 right now? Is it Oklahoma? Is it Texas? Is it Oklahoma State, who we also won't get into, but won another one. So
I think resume. I think you've got to give it to Oklahoma State. Just that big win over Boise going on the road. Boise's dropped 3 now, but I still think they've been the most tested.
Yes.
Now we'll see who comes out of this.
Boise also could have won every one of those games. This Nevada game was the only one that they probably were a little bit more beaten in, even though that one was up for grabs, closing too. So Boise might be 2-3, but could also be very easily a 5-0 with a lot of good wins on it. So Oklahoma State going into Boise with that win, probably pretty good. They sort of, I think it confuses everybody because it's not an Oklahoma State team like we've seen. Certainly not like we've seen with Gundy in the past. So maybe they're a little bit better than we thought. They keep finding ways to win. It's very similar to Oklahoma. They keep finding ways to win.
But it's not pretty.
It's not pretty, but they found ways to win. Texas, on the other hand, they do seem to look pretty, but the one time they got punched in the mouth versus Arkansas, they dropped really, really quick.
Well, turnovers cost.
Yes, so I don't quite know where to rate Texas. Probably I lean right now, probably Texas from what I've seen. They look really, really explosive. We'll see this week, but sort of an interesting race in the Big 12 here. I guess Iowa State is still lingering. Theoretically, they still have all those players that we thought were supposed to challenge for the Big 12, but we'll see if they can find some sort of rhythm on this season as well. All right, so we'll move on to the big game in the Midwest. Cincinnati went down to Notre Dame. I started to lean towards this one on Friday. The more and more I thought about Cincinnati having that bye week, I thought it was really important coming off that, poor performance versus Indiana. There we go. We got it out of there. I thought they looked really, really good here. Notre Dame's offense just wasn't there to play.
Well, the difference in this game was one team had Ritter,
yeah,
and one team couldn't find any kind of answer at quarterback, whether it was Pine, just whoever. Notre Dame just didn't have enough consistency at the quarterback position to produce any kind of offense. I think they barely had double-digit passes completed in this game, and it just really struggled offensively. Their defense was good, but I think Ritter's really underrated as a quarterback. And what he does at Cincinnati.
It's not like shocking, but it's a little. He's a little Andy Dalton like at TCU. It's not always the prettiest, but he does seem to be effective. He does complete really good passes, has decent poise. Even you saw that in the Indiana game. He was playing really, really poorly. He sort of regrouped, found his way, led them to a victory there. They just sort of got out and got on top of Notre Dame. Notre Dame couldn't find an explosive play either. The running back Williams had hit a couple of those in the previous games and given a little bit of momentum. Couldn't find that in this game, and the offense just wasn't really there. The defense kept them in the game, but really, I don't know if they were ever truly in this game if you watched it. So Notre Dame goes down. Interesting game for Notre Dame this week. Yep. Cincinnati gets past the two that we thought in preseason in Indiana and Notre Dame. They really have to start rooting for, Notre Dame to finish out strong, because that Indiana win isn't going to hold any water, even if, by the end of the season, we don't remember that they probably should have lost that game. But it's not going to hold anything because Indiana's so poor this year. But I guess, if Notre Dame can keep winning, that looks pretty good. I don't know if they're a lock for the conference quite yet. Houston's coming on a little bit here. Central Florida's dropped off due to Dylan Gabriel, but Smoo in there has looked pretty good. So it's a pretty interesting conference. We'll see if Cincinnati can ride through that, because I do think there are some tough games for them in the conference as well. I think everybody thought they beat Indiana, they beat Notre Dame, pencil them in, but I think they'll have a couple tough ones here in conference too.
Yeah, definitely. There's some good teams there.
All right. Michigan went to Wisconsin.
Impressive win.
This was probably the best I'd seen Michigan play in quite a while. Wisconsin continues to be garbage. Mertz finally was no longer there by the second half. Thank goodness from watching that. But anyway, easily the best I'd see Michigan play. Defense was on point like it's been all year. And even the offense had a little bit more balance, I thought, than it has coming into it. They were able to pass the ball pretty well, hit some big plays, and then was able to continue with that running game, pounding it away. But Wisconsin, I think this is more a testament to them. They are not a very good football team this year.
Yeah, but a big statement win for Michigan.
Anytime you can go in there and win a game.
Yeah, and a lot of people I think have been sleeping on them this year so far. Ohio State, everybody focused on them. They lost, but they're still talking about them. And then you got the other big boys, Penn State and Iowa. Everybody's talking about, but don't forget Michigan's 5-0 right there, and they seem to be clicking at all the different facets of the game. They showed against Wisconsin they could throw the ball. They've shown against some other teams that they can run the ball really well, and their defense is stepping up. So this might be the most complete Michigan team Harbaugh's had since he's been there. Maybe they can turn things around and win the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, we'll move to the most overrated team coming in to the college football season, and they continue to prove that. Texas A&M was at home, and they lost to Mississippi State 26-22. It was a pretty close game throughout, but I thought Mississippi State pretty much was in control the whole game. They pretty much looked like they could dump their little short passing game on them all the way down. Once again, Texas A&M's quarterback play was poor. They ran the ball pretty solidly, but I just thought Mississippi State probably was the better team here.
Yeah, I don't know how many times people have to watch Mississippi State play and just all these dump off passes and just give it to them. Because that's how they get these big wins, is just those easy plays. They don't have to think about it too hard. They just keep dinking and dunking all the way down the field.
They were able to get some touchdowns too.
well, yeah, they get toward. I mean, but if you're getting 5 to 8 yards every play, you're gonna score points. And it wasn't a huge scoring game. They only scored 26 points, but at some point you've got to come up and put a stop to that and make them beat you over the top, make the quarterback make the throws. But if you give him the easy stuff, he's going to take it all day long.
Yeah. I think this Mississippi State team's pretty solid. But
just a couple tough losses, but nothing major.
And they could have won both
they
those
were in
games,
position to win both of them.
Texas A&M, I continue to be disappointed, both offensively and defensively. They can try to blame it as much as they want on that quarterback, but that quarterback was like a 5-star prospect. He was actually favored to get the job in the preseason. So I don't totally want to hear that. But it's not only that. I don't think their defense has lived up to the standard we were hearing about, in the preseason, where they were going to shut everybody down. They were as good as Georgia. They were as good as Alabama. That hasn't proved to the case to be either. They have an okay defensive line, but they have not shown that they can really hang with any of the top teams in the SEC. I think they're probably going to get embarrassed again this week. We weren't getting the 14.5 again for Alabama this week. Sadly, I was sort of hoping that number would be in there, but didn't come this week. A&M continues to disappoint Mississippi State. Another solid win. Next up, Arizona State went to UCLA. We talked about in our preview that UCLA had a really hard, regular season schedule, and it just keeps coming. And they got the lottery Arizona State team that came in and played like the players that they have. So tough game for UCLA. Arizona State's defense showed up, which it hadn't all season long. And then their offense really was efficient, which it had not been all season long. So sort of tough luck there. You hit the Arizona State lottery and get a good version of them, and you go down. But good win by Arizona State. They are now just 4-1, with the only loss being that BYU. Maybe some people want to start giving some love to BYU because they got 2 wins now versus Utah and Arizona State, and they play Boise State coming up this week. But what'd you make of this game? I guess it gives Arizona State a little bit of a leg up in that Pac-12 South.
Yeah, I thought UCLA had gotten over the hump from that first loss that they had and figured things out, but just defensively they weren't ready for Arizona State. And it's like you said, Arizona State, 1 week they're clicking, 1 week they're not. This happened to be a week they were clicking really good. And when this offense is clicking, they're hard to stop.
Yeah. Who do you make in the Pac-12 South as favorites? UCLA, this counts as a conference loss, but they're all the losses to Fresno, so it's not a conference loss. You still have Utah hovering in there. We could probably cross out USC, Arizona State, now 2-0 in the conference. Do you make them favorites, or are you just waiting for them to go to Arizona and lose a game, or go up to Washington State and lose a game?
I don't trust this Arizona State team. Like it probably depends.
It would probably be Colorado, actually.
I'd have to look at their cross divisional place to remember who they're playing, but I just there's no way this Arizona State team runs the table. Now, do they drop 2? I don't know. It's going to be close. That at Washington stuff,
yes.
and then at Oregon State, they might just stay up north. I don't know if they'll go back down to Arizona State between those 2 games, but those are 2 plus tough road matchups towards the end of the season. And those teams, they get their kicks out of ruining people's years, especially the Beavers at Oregon State. So I don't count UCLA out yet. I think they've got the best coach in the Pac-12. He rallied them once after a loss. Can he do it again? I think so, but they're going to have to run a clean slate to be there for the conference.
Yeah, definitely so. All right. So that was our week 5 recap and review of our games in the week. Let's get into our picks for week 5. I had a 7-6 week overall. So my first winning week on the season. We're starting to get on track. We went 6-6 the week before, 7-6 this week. What could go wrong? I'm making picks on Wednesday. So anyway, I had that Arkansas Georgia under that hit pretty easy in that one. I will no longer be taking Wisconsin in any level of thing until college basketball starts up. So Wisconsin on the blacklist from now on. Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois. Eastern Michigan let me down in both ways, did not score, and did not win that game. So a double ale there. Cincinnati got the win on that one. Our head-to-head matchup of MAC Titans, Miami of Ohio, Central Michigan. I came away with a winner on that one.
Yep.
Ohio State records, I think we both thought Ohio State was going to put it on them.
Yeah.
And Ohio State did put it on them. Alabama, Ole Miss, you mentioned it, the under 80 was a winner. Arkansas State went to Georgia Southern. Apparently their players were not drinking on top of a bus before the game in this one and were able to get the win. So Arkansas State, disappointing.
Bad defense.
Yeah, especially bad defensively. UAB, very bad second half. 3-3 going into halftime. I thought we were in Cruz UAB ugly game mode. And then Liberty came out and finally sort of showed the offense that we've been waiting for all season long. UTEP -5.5 versus ODU was a winner. Oregon State -2 versus Washington was a winner. And we mentioned it, LSU -3 versus Auburn was quite disappointing. LSU, no run game whatsoever in that one. And somehow Bo Nix finally played a good football game. I think that's his first one of his career. So nothing like playing 40 college football games and having one good one. Meanwhile, you had a tough week overall, 6-8-1. You also got burned on that UAB Liberty one. That was a loss. Ole Miss, Alabama, we mentioned on the under of 79 on that one. Kansas State +10.5 versus Oklahoma was a good one. Georgia Tech +3.5 versus Pittsburgh. Georgia Tech did not come to play. Fun team to try to figure out when they're going to play and when they're not going to play, because when they don't play, it does not look good. So that one, we mentioned Central Michigan +1, lost to Miami of Ohio. South Carolina got the win versus Troy on the -7. Barely so. Wake Forest -7 versus Louisville. Didn't quite cover that one, even though I thought Wake Forest pretty much dominated that game all the way through. Louisville, probably an annoying team to have around there when your spread's hovering around that mark, because I think they're always going to score points there late in the fourth quarter. Texas -5 versus TCU, got that struggling push, and the 5.5 you got on one, caught you a tough parlay.
Yeah,
I know that was annoying. Arizona State, UCLA over 54.5, got that a winner. Boston College +15.5, got that winner. Clemson continues to be the easy covering if they're getting 10 points or more, take the other team. Western Kentucky +10.5, did not quite have the juice to go into Michigan State this week. Fresno State 10.5 versus Hawaii. Not a clean game for Fresno State. That's 2 in a row. I don't know if the pressure is getting to them or what, but if you are playing UNLV and Hawaii, it's starting to make me a little nervous. Oklahoma State -3.5 versus Baylor was a winner.
Impressive win against a good Baylor team
That
that
was-
everyone was starting
yeah.
to hop on.
That Baylor team looked pretty good. I don't know why they look good, but they do. So maybe Baylor throws their name in that Big 12 hat too. So they played pretty solid in that game, but Oklahoma State once again comes out with a winner. They did score points in the fourth quarter in that one. So Oklahoma State at least did not get shut out in the second half again. Purdue versus Minnesota. That was a loss there. Purdue not looking clean ever since that running back went out. That offense has sort of died a little bit. Haven't quite, I don't think either of us have made our adjustment because I don't think we thought the running back factored all that much, but apparently he does.
Yeah.
And lastly, Arkansas plus 18 and a half versus
That was
Georgia.
over quick.
Once that was 21-0, the only hope was Georgia might pack it in for the day and you get a token score for Arkansas late, but no way in that one. All right, so let's get into week 6 and let's get into our previews and the game of week. Pretty light slate. Not a lot of big games.
A few really good ones.
So if you're looking to do something with your wife, I would suggest this be the week you go and do something with your wife, because I don't think you're missing too much of really top tier games this week. So at least not in my eyes. Now, there are some subdivision games that you might want to tune into. North Dakota State, Northern Iowa, James Madison, Villanova, if you are really into the football thing. But we might have some picks on Saturday for Winning Daily for the subdivision games. Anyway, let's get into week 6 here. Let's start out with the big one, Oklahoma versus Texas here. We mentioned who we thought were Big 12 favorites. I'm really liking the way Texas is looking here. Haven't loved the way Oklahoma looks, but that would be that maneuver. You finally start to trust Texas, and Oklahoma finally gets a blowout that I think we've been waiting for all season for. What do you make of this Oklahoma-Texas game here?
Well, you know, the way Oklahoma's been playing in ugly games, I think they're going to want to make this another ugly game. Texas has proven that they're multidimensional offensively. They've got a solid run game. They've got a solid passing game. But Oklahoma, I think, is a little more talented defensively. You know, Texas, they went up against Texas Tech. Yeah, they scored 70, but they allowed 35. Gave up a good bit to TCU this past week as well. So I think if this game's ugly, Oklahoma could be right there. And but I just don't know if Texas gets rolling offensively. I think it could be a blowout. They're in their favor.
I'm curious how you think this game is going to go. But previous years, it's been all shootout. You know, and really, if you watch Oklahoma play this year, they haven't been in any shootouts, which is really, really weird. So does this game go back into that sort of shootout, or does it play out how Oklahoma's played this, sort of 20s, 30s type game here? Or does it go into the way Texas, who has really sort of been back and forth all season long in shootouts other than that Arkansas game? So how do you think this game goes? Number sits at 63.5. That sort of tells me the odds makers don't know, because in the years past, this thing's been one of those that's in the 68s, 70s. I think there was a 72 or 73 in there a couple of years ago. So how do you think this game's going to play?
I think that comes from the lack of production on Oklahoma's offense. Now, Oklahoma, I bet they've watched the film from that Texas-Arkansas game about 100 times this past week, because that's how they're going to want to make this game. They're going to want to control the tempo. They're not going to want Texas to come out and get the big plays. I think if they make Texas grind it out, they can keep it close. But honestly, while they're undefeated, I think Texas should be favored here. I think they've. I don't know. Oklahoma's got a big win against K-State. I just haven't been impressed by them, and just eye test. I like Texas better.
Yeah, I don't have a pick in this game. Maybe I'll talk myself into it, because I just don't want to take Texas and then by 2 p.m, they're losing 35-3. And I'm like, why did I trust this Texas team every time they play a big game? They lose. They have wins over TCU and Texas Tech. And I'm telling myself they're a great team. When 3 weeks before that, they went to Arkansas and basically just got punched in the mouth and had nothing. So I am leaning Texas. I do think Texas is probably the better team here, but I haven't quite talked myself into quite right in that 3.5 number, though I sort of like that 3.5 on that one. All right, let's move on to Arkansas, Ole Miss. Both teams coming off disappointing losses here. I think this game will be who can bounce back off that disappointing loss. And really, I I know we differ a little bit in this, but I sort of like Arkansas's bounce back potential here. I think they just will wipe that game off, go back to what they do. Now, once again, they have to get out in front. They can't get behind too many touchdowns here, but I was concerned with Ole Miss offense versus that Alabama defense. They seem to get pushed around a little bit, and that's what Arkansas does. So I'm curious if Arkansas, both offensively and defensively, can push them around and we get sort of a game played in the 20s here.
Well, see, I'm opposite you. I actually think the bounce back potential is greater for Ole Miss. I think they've got the best quarterback in the SEC, and I think that offense is going to produce against this Arkansas team. And we saw it against Georgia. Ole Miss gets up 2 touchdowns, it's over. Arkansas is not coming back on anybody.
Yeah, definitely so. This over-under sits at 65. I thought that was a little bit high from what I saw, last week.
Yeah.
And really from what I've seen from Ole Miss all year long. They've been a good offensive team, but they have not played those games like they played in the previous, 3 or 4 years where they're playing 50s and 60s. Their defense is improved. I mean, it's not good, but it's not Missouri style giving up a 70-yard play every time somebody touches the ball. It has been able to sort of slow teams down a little bit. So I thought that number might be a little high, and that's where I thought maybe Arkansas can hang with them, play it in the 20s. I don't know if they can get the win here, but I did think that 6.5, sort of was a little bit high, but you mentioned it. If Ole Miss gets on top of them, certainly Arkansas's had a tough road here. A&M, Georgia, now Ole Miss. That's a hell of a 3-game stretch there.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Georgia goes to Auburn.
Maybe the best offense they've played.
Maybe the best offense they've played. I don't know quite what that's saying, but we didn't preview it. But Auburn coming off the big win, first time they won in LSU in like 22 years.
Yeah, I think it was early 90s.
Yeah. So big win there. Bo Nix coming off the best game of his life. Does that continue here? I don't know. I really don't know what to make of Auburn. I haven't liked the way they've played, but then that was a big time win going into LSU, even if LSU is not that good a team. I mean, they've had not that good of teams for the last 22 years, and still Auburn hasn't been able to manage to go in there and win. So I do give them credit here. It is in Auburn. Does Auburn have any chance versus this Georgia team?
Maybe.
If Bo Nix remains good.
Well, they live and die by Bo Nix, and last week he was a winner.
He looked like a good quarterback.
And he got the win. But they've been this way for 3 years.
Yeah.
They can win big games and they can lose big games. So I think if good Bo Nix shows up, this could be a little closer than Georgia likes. But I don't know if they cover that 10, but I think Georgia's going to come out with a win.
Yeah. You mentioned it. Georgia has to get re-up for this one after a big Arkansas game. Now they have to go to Auburn. Maybe there's a little bit of a letdown early. I think that defense is a little bit too good for Auburn to really put any trouble on them. But Auburn maybe surprised me again. I don't have a good read on what Auburn is this year. I didn't think they looked great in that Penn State game when Penn State was asking to lose that game, and they couldn't take advantage of that. You mentioned some of the other Auburn games where they've been close with lower tier teams that they probably should have run off the floor. And Georgia's pretty much run off the floor with everybody but Clemson. And essentially they shut Clemson out. Not as hard as it has been, but still always hard to shut out a team with that level of players on it. All right. Next up, the big one in the Big Ten. Penn State goes to Iowa.
Biggest game of the week.
Biggest game of the week. So this one sits at 42.5. I don't think there's going to be a lot of scoring here. I'm guessing Iowa doesn't open up with about 30 passes to start the first half here. Penn State, this is probably their first real true road game of the year. Always tough to go into Iowa. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, this is I'm having a really hard time. I've been back and forth both ways on this. I think if the line were to go over that 3 in either direction, I may have to lean one way. But honestly, Iowa really impressed me last week offensively. And if they come out with that aggressive play style and manage to not, have some quick 3 and outs. If they can score that big play early and jump on Penn State, I like Iowa to hang on. But Penn State, they're heck, both these teams are very blue collar.
Yeah.
So like you said, that under's probably looking pretty sweet. But I'm really just looking forward to a great football game. I don't think I'm going to have a play on this one.
Yeah. I originally had put the 2.5 for Penn State down. And then I just started thinking and looking at stuff, and I'm like, that's not enough points. I want a little more. You mentioned it up to 3. I think I'd want it even up to probably about 4 or so, just because I haven't seen Penn State on the road. Iowa has been ridiculous at causing turnovers. Now, I know, theoretically that's not sustainable. That's not something you should factor in, but it might be sustainable for this year. And then next year is when they can't force as many turnovers. And, I still don't totally trust that Penn State quarterback. He's a little bit turnover prone. So is he going to give Iowa those turnovers? If he does that, I don't know if this Penn State defense, can sort of stand up to it like it did in that Wisconsin game, where, the Penn State offense just couldn't get going. And that Penn State defense was on the field for, I think, 2/3 of the game.
Yeah.
Now, they didn't allow a touchdown, but I don't know if they can do that versus Iowa team. We've seen that Wisconsin team really, really poor on offense. This Iowa team is not pretty on offense, but if you give them turnovers and the ball that much, they're going to score points. Mm-hmm. So, I still think I lean Penn State really because I like that running back. I think their defense is a little bit underrated. I don't think people are paying attention because they don't have the, turnovers that Iowa plays, but I think they're really, really hard to play. Very sort of James Franklin type team. But that probably concerns me a little bit too going in here. I don't want to watch as he's trying to close out some sort of game and does some bad time mismanagement. So, 2.5 wasn't quite enough for me here yet. But I do lean Penn State, but, I think this Iowa football team really showed me something last week with the ability to throw that passing game out there.
Yep.
All right. This one I'm really, really intrigued with here. Notre Dame goes to Virginia Tech coming off their first loss of the season. Virginia Tech sort of coming off their first loss. They had Richmond and then a bye. So they've sort of had 2 weeks to prepare for this game, which, really, really makes me want to take Virginia Tech in that +1. I stared at it very hard. That might work its way in there, later in the week here.
This one's not on my list yet, but I'm like you. I'm leaning Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
I watched them play defense in that opener against North Carolina, and this is a Notre Dame team that's already struggling to find an offense. And I think it's going to be really hard to go onto probably one of the most hostile road environments in the country. And, the big letdown where they lose their perfect season last week, are the guys going to be up for a big night game in Blacksburg? So I like Virginia Tech here, and depending on where the bettors come, you might even get more value than the +1.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of hoping maybe people start to push towards Notre Dame here. You got a night game in Blacksburg.
Yeah.
Notre Dame coming off a loss. Very poor offense. Even if you look at that Virginia Tech loss to West Virginia, that second half, the defense shut down West Virginia. It was all those first half points, that stupid play at the start of the opening play of the game where they ran that little trick play, that wide receiver pass, and then, a couple poor turnovers there. West Virginia got up on them. But then in that second half, West Virginia didn't do anything. Virginia Tech made their push, and you could probably even say they probably should have scored that last touchdown and come away with a win there, but they did not. So they have a loss here, but a couple of things are factoring in there. I mentioned they sort of were on a 2-week bye. Now Richmond is, a pretty good subdivision team, so you can't take them too lightly. I believe Virginia Tech has lost to them once or twice before. But they had that week, then a bye week last week coming into this. I don't know if Notre Dame's offense can sustain once again here, and we'll see if Virginia Tech sort of doesn't have such a slow start like they did versus West Virginia. I don't think they will in Blacksburg, but really interesting game. I really stared at that one. I don't know if I can quite make myself take it because I do think Notre Dame probably has better talent, but I think Virginia Tech might be the better team here. All right, this one, interesting here. Yeah. LSU goes to Kentucky. Kentucky coming off the big win versus Florida. They are 5-0. It is not a pretty 5-0,
No.
but it is 5-0 here. LSU coming off a bad loss at home to Auburn. What do you make of this matchup here? I'm riding for LSU once again.
Well,
but I'm very, very nervous here.
Well, I'm going to get upset at myself because I'm really talking myself into LSU here.
Yes, I know, because they're getting 3.5.
Well, they're getting 3.5, and you know what I'm feeling? Kentucky, they get these big wins every now and then, like they did last week, and they've had Florida circled this whole year, and I think there could be really, really big potential for a letdown game here. I think they may be getting a little too confident. I don't think talent-wise they still match up with the best in the SEC. Yes. I think they got some big breaks go their way against Florida, which you got to get the breaks sometimes. But I don't know if they can get a back-to-back over Florida and LSU. And LSU getting points, I may end up adding them to my list.
Yeah, I think that's where I think that key number, it's above that. It's 3.5. I think I wouldn't be stunned if Kentucky could win it, but I don't think they can win it by this could screaming field goal game in the closing minutes here.
14, 13, 17, 14, 21, 20. It's going to be right in that range because Kentucky's not going to win a game big.
Yeah.
They're not going to come in and blow out LSU. No. So getting the 3.5 with a talented team like the Tigers,
That's the only thing that concerns me about this game is how much will is left in this LSU team. I thought I saw some spark in that Mississippi State game, and then I watched that Auburn game, and there was no spark. Now, some of that might be because they couldn't run the ball a half yard the whole game. But, I didn't think that defense was great, especially to close out that game. LSU was up, and they let Auburn come in, get a couple plays in there, and just lost that one in LSU. Now they're traveling to Kentucky. I just think that number is a little off. Overreaction to Kentucky beating Florida. While Florida, I think we think is a good team. I don't think it's some team that, it was shocking that Kentucky beat them.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh my God, Steve Spurrier in Florida went in there and lost to Kentucky, or Urban Meyer in Florida went in there and lost to Kentucky. This is a Florida team that's probably better than Kentucky, but the margin is more here than here.
Yeah.
So I just think this number is a little bit inflated, even if LSU has not looked good coming off last week. Next up, Michigan goes to Nebraska. Nebraska found some offense last week versus Northwestern. That was a tough one for me in my money line upset specials. I thought Northwestern might come around, and instead they've somehow gotten worse after their bye week than better. Nebraska scored 59 points in that one. Defense continues to play well, 7. Michigan probably played their best game of the season last week, going to Cornhuskers. What do you think of this one?
I like Michigan. I don't think Michigan screws this up. I think I'm shocked that it's only 3.5 points. I thought it was awfully low for an undefeated Big Ten team, against a Nebraska team that honestly we're surprised they're 3-3. We think this team should have 1 or 2 more losses on their belt. So actually this Nebraska team's playing better, but no, I like Michigan here. I think they may drop 1 or 2 later in the year, but it's not going to be Nebraska.
Well, guess what? I'm in love with Nebraska again. I have fallen back in love with Scott Frost and Nebraska. They hooked me back in with their 59-point win this week. I really like Nebraska here sitting on this one. I think it's a tricky place for Michigan to go into. I think Nebraska will be fired up for this game. And I think maybe they found a little bit of offense here, but I do think this game might be a little bit more defensive than we think too, because Nebraska's defense has played really well all year long. Michigan's defense has been pretty solid. So I'm really interested to see how this game plays out. And if Nebraska may have found, a little bit of something. They probably should have won that Michigan State game. Don't punt to the guy. I'll get over that because I did end up getting the spread cover. Still annoying. If they don't punt to him, they get a win. I got a nice upset special. But I'm really curious about this game and if Michigan could continue to impress after a good win in Wisconsin, or we have a little bit of letdown on back-to-back.
I'm still surprised with the lack of just chatter about Michigan. I think they're getting a little disrespect from the Harbaugh years where they've just continued to be letdown after letdown after letdown. But I think this is the best team he's had, and I think they're going to go in Nebraska and impress again.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's just waiting till Ohio State has 60 on them and they get embarrassed again. But I'm really curious about this game. Just interested to see how it plays out, and sort of a interesting game. And lastly, we got Alabama at Texas A&M. Boy, did CBS was excited about this game, and then there's not much to be excited about here.
This game was one we circled in our preseason shows a long time ago, and it's lost a little bit of its luster here as A&M is just disappointed on both the offensive side and defensive side of the ball.
Sadly, they cannot move off that big 8:00 CBS doubleheader spot in prime time, because I think this one probably is over pretty quickly here. I see zero chance Texas A&M's offense finally discovers something versus Alabama defense. Maybe there is a slight hope that the A&M defense can sort of slow Alabama down, but from what I've gathered, there is no way A&M scoring on Bama here.
No, and actually, I'm tempted to take Bama on the even, minus the 17.5, but it depends on how early Bama puts the brakes on. We've seen it twice this year. They've put the brakes on teams that they've had beat early. But I guess it really depends on how much respect Saban has for Jimbo Fisher. This is one where he could just embarrass him on national TV and win by 40 here, because Alabama should be able to do whatever they want.
Yeah, I was very hoping this was coming in at the 14.5. They'd been laying on Bama all year long. And then I saw 17.5, and it's just enough of a little tweak where you're like, Bama's going to get up 30-0, give up 2 touchdowns, and game will be over.
One thing if you can find the prop, I think Bama gets a defensive or special teams touchdown in this game.
I think so for sure. With the way that quarterback is going to be under pressure and how loose he is with the football. I do think Saban might tweak Jimbo here. So I'm not totally scared off that 17.5 point number. I think he might put it on him a little bit here, just to sort of tweak this A&M team and have them fall to 3-3. So those are our games that we mentioned. It was a light week, but I got a handful of picks here. So we'll go into our picks this week. How many picks you got?
I've got 11.
12 picks for me. So we're about on the same wavelength here. Why don't you start us off?
I'll start us off with one that really was tugging at my heartstrings here, because I've liked both of these teams in picks all year. Is the UTSA at Western Kentucky game. Western Kentucky, I had them as my big upset pick last week. I thought they'd go into Michigan State and take down a big team. Couldn't quite do it, but I really like this Roadrunners team. And getting 3.5. I think between two teams that I like, I'm going to take the 3.5. I'm going to go with the road team and the Road Runners.
Yeah, I think this game's an interesting game. We'll see if the Road Runners can get another tough road win. They went into Memphis, got a win there. Now going into Hilltopper land, trying to get a win there. I'll
be interested to see what Western Kentucky's offense can do against probably a weak San Antonio defense.
So. I did stare at this over a little bit here.
High 60s right now?
Yes, it was a little bit. I thought it might be one of those that hit 70. It didn't hit 70, and I started to raise a little bit of an eyebrow, but I don't know quite what Western Kentucky is. There are times they look really, really good, but they've had this habit pretty much all year long of getting behind early, and that just sort of scares me, especially as you start to get later and later in the season, where you less and less want to, start to play football games. So we'll see where UT San Antonio get another tough win. See if they can sort of put themselves in the mix in the AAC conference here. They've played really well. They're undefeated as well. So see what they can do. My first pick, we're going to continue to ride the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're in blowout territory of the Buckeyes schedule here. They're playing Maryland. Maryland's coming to them. If Iowa is capable of passing all over them, I think Ohio State's capable of passing all over them. I'm not scared off that 20.5. I think Ohio State puts it on pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's a solid pick. Ohio State, they're still taking out some frustrations after that upset to Oregon, and their offense is among the best in the country. So they're going to put all over this terrible Maryland defense.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. What do you got up
Next up, I'm going to ride this team one last time.
All right.
Maybe more if they get me a win this week. But I've taken them a lot, and they keep letting me down. Georgia Tech -3.5 at Duke. I think they'll bounce back. I think they got enough offensively to get some points up against a okay Duke team. Duke's actually been a little better than I thought they were going to be this year, but it's still at Duke, and I'm going to take Georgia Tech.
Yeah, we'll see if Georgia Tech can bounce back. Really disappointing game last week. That thing was over in 5 minutes. That was one of those where you just go, okay, that's a loss.
Yep.
Check. And next up for me, we talked about this one. I'm going to take Arkansas plus the 6 versus Ole Miss in that one. I'm going to ride that this is a little bit tighter of a game than people think. I like the bounce back factor.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and throw it out. It's a little further down my list, but I've got Ole Miss, but I got a -6.5. So I don't think that'll make a difference from off the 6, but still under a touchdown. I think we pretty much disagree on everything on this game. So a good head-to-head matchup.
Well, I think if it's in and around the 6, I'm probably getting the game I want. And if it's off that 6 number, you're probably getting the game you want. So I don't know how much in play the 6.5 will go. If it's tight and close, I probably lean towards me. And if Ole Miss starts to run away with it, I don't think the 6 matters. It could be 20 for all that point. All right. Next up, I didn't put this one in, but the stinker of the week. We had an exciting one with Vandy and UConn last week. We got another classic. UMass versus UConn this week. A battle of Northeast dynasties, not Northwest. Northeast dynasties. UMass getting 3.5. We're riding UMass. I think UMass is a little bit better than people think. UConn has played better, but they're still losing. But I like UMass getting plus the 3.5 in the stinker of the week.
I'm not watching that game.
Oh, you're watching it. You're going to be driving and listening to it on the radio. Sirius XM. What channel is the UMass UConn on? All right. What do you got next?
Next up, I'm going to take Toledo -12.5. I think their offense -12.5 versus Northern Illinois. It's a good Northern Illinois team, but they've also been very up and down. And I just like the Toledo offense, and I think they're looking to get another good win in that MAC conference.
Yeah, I'm going into the MAC as well. And I'm going to take your boys from Central Michigan this week, -5.5 versus Ohio. Yes, tough road game, but Ohio has been brutal this year. Got their first win of the season versus Akron, and Akron scored 20 points in that game. So they also have a loss to Duquesne on their schedule. Not an elite subdivision team. So I think Central Michigan,
not basketball.
Yes, bounces back in this one. And covers that 5.5 versus Ohio. I think Ohio's really, really bad.
So for my next team, I'm gonna take a team that you got me onto last week. UTEP -2 at Southern Miss. UTEP's playing really scrappy, and this is a terrible Southern Miss team.
Yeah, it is. This should be an interesting one. I didn't quite put UTEP down this week because I don't know if I trust them quite yet on the road, but we'll see how they do road stuff, and then I might jump back on them. But not quite on the UTEP road favorites bandwagon quite yet. But Southern Miss has been atrocious so far this year. We're staying in the MAC, and we're continuing to ride Miami of Ohio, -1.5 versus Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan just coming off a loss to Northern Illinois. I think Miami of Ohio secretly is kind of one of the teams in the MAC that might make some noise. So I really like this team. I think that -1.5 pretty decent. This should be an offensive game.
Well, you say that, but where was Eastern Michigan's offense last week? It disappeared. So, and Miami of Ohio had a really good week last week, and that's a good thing.
Maybe it only scores when they're on the gray turf up in Ypsilanti. So anyway, Miami, Ohio, we're going to ride them until they maybe make an adjustment here. So Miami, Ohio, -1.5 versus Eastern Michigan. Yeah. What do you got?
Next up, we already talked about it. I'm taking Michigan -3 on the road at Nebraska.
Oh, all right. And speaking of, I got Nebraska at 3.5. So I got Nebraska. You got Michigan. We got some duelers this week.
Yeah, a couple
off a
head-to-heads.
half point. So we might be able to middle this somewhere. I don't know if that one, this one probably the 3.5 might come into a little bit more of a play than
Maybe you'll get a push and I'll get a push.
Yes. All right. So Nebraska plus 3.5 for me. Next up, another stink fest of a game, but people probably don't know that South Alabama is 4-1.
They're a good team. They actually rate out as one of the best defenses in the
Yes,
country.
I know, but I'm going with Texas State plus 3.5 for
Bobcats.
South Alabama. I think South Alabama might be a little bit overrated. Yes, their grades are all very nice, but they haven't played all that tough a schedule. The aforementioned Southern Miss and teams in and around that level of play.
Yeah.
Texas State has played a lot of good teams. Technically, they do have a couple poor losses to one subdivision team. Incarnate Word on there, but Incarnate Word, good subdivision team. I think you were talking about that game a couple of weeks ago. You were like, why is Texas State only favored by 3? And I'm like, hey, Incarnate Word probably better than they are. But we're going to ride that out anyway. Texas State plus the 3.5. I think this is a pretty tight, close, gross game. But you might have to battle radio space between UMass, UConn, Texas State, South.
Oh, gosh. We want to keep me awake while I'm driving.
All right. What do you got next?
I like BYU -5 at home. I think Boise State historically struggled a little bit on the road, and this BYU team's really impressed me this year. And I think they're going to come out and beat a worse than usual Boise State. So
this should be an interesting game.
Yeah.
I'm really interested. BYU's got about 2 or 3 more big games with this one on their schedule to really ride undefeated. And I think if they go undefeated, they have to be in talks to be in there.
yeah,
Especially with wins over
people.
Arizona State and Utah. I believe they have USC on the schedule. I know that's not as impressive, but that's 3 Pac-12 teams
Well,
and a Boise State team
you
on
can't-
there.
You can't count it against somebody when they schedule, USC, Utah, Arizona State, Boise, just because some of those teams are having down years.
Yeah.
It's not the scheduler's
Yeah.
fault, and they're taking care of business. So I like them to win by more than a touchdown.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see if Boise State can sort of bounce back. They've had close games and haven't been able to win the close games. It's just they haven't been able. I don't know the last time they lost 2 games at home. Probably like in '89 when they were in an AIA team and there was no blue turf. So interesting to see if they can go on the road, get that win at BYU, and BYU keep it up. Next up for me, I'm taking LSU plus the 3.5 versus Kentucky. We already talked about that. I thought this line was a little bit off. I think Kentucky getting a little bit too much of a bounce here off that Florida win.
Yeah. Another one we already talked about. I think probably the most fun game to watch this weekend. I think it should be exciting is Texas, Oklahoma. I like Texas plus 3.5. I think it's going to be another shootout, and I just like what Texas has offensively.
Yeah, I don't quite have that one in there, but I might talk myself into it by weeks in. Next up for me, I'm going Utah plus the 3 versus USC. This is a little tricky. Utah struggled to go into USC, but I think they're a much better team. Now, the only weird thing is how they sort of bounced back. They did have that bye week after their player was killed. We'll see how they bounce back in this one.
Yeah.
It's probably, goes one or 2 ways. It either goes really bad or really good. We'll see how they do. But I think Utah's a better team, and they probably saw UCLA go down, and they probably think they can sort of put a push here for the Pac-12 South. If they get this win, then they probably sit there, especially since Arizona State comes into Utah. So I like Utah getting the plus 3 versus USC here.
Speaking of UCLA, I'm going to take Stanford. This is a big Friday night game. I like Stanford's getting 12 right now on the road at Arizona State. Yeah, we saw a good Arizona State team, but I like this scrappy Stanford team. And I think while they might not get the win, I think they're going to keep it under 12.
Yeah, I think this is also one of those teams that Arizona State really, really struggles with. Any team that wants to work hard and play hard, they tend to not like that much. Stanford's in a lot of the same style as BYU, not quite as skilled, but I think that 12 is really sort of a pretty big number. That's probably a little bit of a bounce from that UCLA. We'll see if Arizona State can put together 2 good games in a row. Next up for me, Arkansas Ole Miss. I'm going to ride that under 66. We talked about it a little bit. I just don't think this Ole Miss team is quite the scoring team, and I know this Arkansas team does not play games into the 60s. So I thought that was a little bit high. Not 80, but 66 seemed a little bit high to me. So under 66 in Arkansas Ole Miss.
For my last pick, I'm going to take the over in the Tennessee-South Carolina game. I got it at 53. I think it's already moved a few points. Tennessee proved that they finally got that high-pull offense to show up now. It was against Missouri's non-existent defense.
Cones play better defense than they did.
Yeah. But I think Tennessee's going to find ways to move the ball against South Carolina. Now, South Carolina struggled a little bit offensively this year, but Tennessee's secondary has proved susceptible, and I think South Carolina is going to find enough plays to get this over.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing I'd worry about is how many can South Carolina put on there. I think Tennessee probably can get in the 30s or 40s, and South Carolina probably get in that 10s, 20s to push that over. We'll see how they do. They haven't really matched up for some offense, like Tennessee's all season long. So we'll see what they have. Next up for me, Virginia, Louisville. This is probably a pretty big game in the ACC. I'm going over 69.5. Anyone who's watched Virginia or Louisville play, defense has been optional this year for both teams. So 69.5, yes, high, but I think this one probably needs to be in the mid 70s from what I see, especially with the way Louisville tends to pack on points late if they get behind. So even if Virginia gets up on them, I think Louisville will score points late. And if it goes the other way, Louisville gets up on them, I think Virginia closes and gets, points late. So I think that's 69.5. While it's a big number, I don't think it's big enough for this one. And lastly, Penn State, Iowa, under 41. I think this one's probably played in the 10s to 12s here. So I'm not expecting much offense in this one.
Yeah, that game's going to come down to a field goal.
Or missed field goal.
Missed field goal, blocked field goal.
Yes. Bad clock management.
Classic Big Ten football.
All right. That's our show for the week. We had both our review and our picks. We'll be back next week with a 2-show week. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're coming back with our NFL show in the next couple of days, so you don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss Winning Daily to make sure we have all our picks on the big Saturday, so you don't miss anything. Maybe Texas sneaks in there. Maybe a couple more sneaks in there. You want the upset specials. You want the parlays. This was the first week I didn't win a parlay. We're hoping to bounce back this week and see what we do. Be sure to like and subscribe. That's our show, and we're out.
Greenlight Network presents Football Time.